An independent report has just completely challenged the official account of Yu Menglong's death, revealing temporal and visual discrepancies that have reopened the public debate across China. With this statement began one of the year's most significant controversies in the Chinese media landscape. The death of actor Yu Menglong, officially announced as an accident resulting from a fall from a building due to alcohol consumption, initially seemed like a tragic but closed case. However, the public reaction quickly intensified as rumors, videos, fragmented testimonies, and unofficial analyses began circulating, raising questions about the coherence of the official account. Attention was once again focused on the case after a small group of netizens, mainly women from various provinces, voluntarily traveled to Beijing to directly examine the sites linked to the incident. According to the data presented by this group, their investigation covered the Yangguang Shandong residential complex, the Bulgari Hotel, and a cultural venue known as Kai Hao. Their proposal consisted of cross-referencing official meteorological records, acoustic analyses, visual observations, and chronological comparisons. The result was a report that, according to multiple commentators, offered a more detailed, logical structure than that provided by the authorities up to that point. The document generated a ripple effect on social media. For many users, it represented the opportunity to revisit a narrative considered incomplete. For others, it marked a growing tension between institutional discourse and citizen oversight. Reactions intensified even further when some videos showed rain, patrol car lights, and coordinated movements on a night that, according to the official statement, did not match the date of death. With these elements, a cycle of questions began that still persists. If the NIT shown in the videos corresponds to the 9th day, what really happened between that day and the 11th, the date indicated in the police report? As this controversy continued to garner attention, a second episode emerged in parallel. Blogger Song Zuday's statements about actor Li Lianjie, known internationally as Jet Li. According to his posts, recent changes in the actor's physical appearance, voice, and demeanor were being questioned, with such observations linked to speculation about advanced medical procedures. Although these claims have not been proven or officially confirmed, their emergence amplified the broader debate about transparency, medical information, and public pressure on influential figures. These two axes, the independent investigation into the Yu Menglong case and the controversy sparked by Song Zud's posts about Li Lianjie, have shaped a scenario in which public opinion simultaneously explores the need for informational clarity and the limitations of the institutional narrative. Below is a structured analysis that examines both episodes from an objective perspective, reconstructing the essential elements that have contributed to the magnitude of this discussion. The controversy surrounding the Yu Menglong case intensified when various internet users began comparing video clips circulating on social media with official weather data from the days before and after the incident. These comparisons gave rise to the independent report's central observation. The NIT shown in the videos does not match the official date announced by the authorities. According to the institutional statement, the death occurred on the 11th due to an accidental fall related to alcohol consumption. However, the evidence in the visual material appears to correspond to a weather event recorded only on the night of the 9th. In the videos, a nighttime atmosphere enveloped in constant rain can be observed. The ground surfaces reflect the glow of the lights, revealing recent moisture, while the sound of raindrops striking metal roofs and hard surfaces dominates the acoustic background. In one of the recordings, a resident is seen holding a dark umbrella, slowly advancing toward a cordoned-off area where several figures move about with high-powered handheld flashlights. The scene is intermittently illuminated by the flashing of police lights, whose blue and red hues highlight the glossy texture of the wet pavement. To determine whether these observations coincided with the official date, the group of researchers collected meteorological records from the Beijing Meteorological Center. According to these data, between the 8th and the 14th, there was only one significant precipitation event recorded from the evening of the 9th to the early morning of the 10th. Platforms such as AccuWeather or Weather Underground provided data that matched this pattern. Based on this information, the group decided to conduct a comparative acoustic analysis of the available recordings. The sound spectrum obtained from the visual material matched the typical characteristics of the rain recorded during the event on the 9th, especially in terms of impact frequency and fall rate. The consistency among the videos, climate records, and acoustic analysis led the group to conclude that the scene could not have occurred on the 11th, but rather on the night of the 9th. According to their interpretation, this temporal discrepancy constituted the most sensitive point in the case, since any alteration to the incident's date would affect the entire sequence of events as officially reported. In addition to the presence of rain, other elements captured in the videos caught the attention of independent analysts. According to them, organized movement of personnel dressed in dark clothing can be observed, apparently carrying out coordination tasks. In certain fragments, sounds that could correspond to radio communications can be heard, which, according to the report, suggests a structured intervention prior to the news being broadcast. In the lobby of building number 18, where the fall allegedly occurred, several guards were observed moving about with a vigilant demeanor, which the group interpreted as a sign of activity prior to any public announcement. These elements, although they do not allow for definitive conclusions, do raise questions about the actual chronology of the event. The report does not directly accuse any party. Instead, it highlights discrepancies and notes that the official timeline may not match what is recorded in the available visual evidence. The absence of rain on the 11th, coupled with the exact coincidence of the weather event on the 9th, creates a significant contrast that, according to the researchers, warrants further analysis. The group also highlighted that rumors about Yu Menglong's death began circulating on social media on the 10th, that is, one day before the official date. This timeline, according to the report, could indicate that certain users had advance information, or that the news was based on some kind of prior observation that has not been publicly clarified. The early spread of these rumors reinforced the perception that the timeline contained gaps. At this point, the root cause analysis of the conflict focused on the difference between an institutional narrative and the observation spontaneously gathered from local residents. The independent report does not offer any conclusive hypotheses. It merely presents inconsistencies that, according to its structure, should be part of a more in-depth review of the case. The divergence between the official date and the date, suggested by the visual environment, constitutes the core of the public debate and the foundation for subsequent phases of this social discussion. In doing so, it sets the tone for understanding the tension between citizens' interpretation and formal reports, a central element of the subsequent media coverage. The publication of the independent report marked the beginning of an entirely new phase in the public perception of the Yu Menglong case. If at first the official news had been limited to a brief statement, the appearance of an extensive document, accompanied by visual, climatic, and chronological analyses, introduced a new level of complexity. According to several observers on social media, the report not only raised additional questions, but also provided a structured framework for reevaluating the prevailing narrative. The combination of charts, detailed descriptions, images of the sites investigated, and comparisons between sources generated an immediate impact, both on local platforms and in international forums. The growth of the discussion was not gradual. On the contrary, it occurred with remarkable speed. In the first few hours after the document was released, topics related to Yu Menglong became top trends on multiple digital platforms. Users in various cities began conducting their own analyses, comparing screenshots, discussing camera angles, and highlighting perceived inconsistencies between the videos and the official information previously released. In this scenario, the independent report acted as a catalyst, bringing together the attention of those who had already suspected the initial narrative, but lacked an organized framework to express their observations. The public reaction was clearly divided into two main groups. On the one hand, there were those who considered the report a necessary contribution to clarifying the facts, arguing that the abundance of visual content available on social media created expectations for a more in-depth analysis. On the other hand, some users insisted that the circulation of unverified material could lead to misinterpretations or fuel speculation that lacked institutional backing. This tension between citizen investigation and official documentation quickly became a central issue in the debate. One of the elements that most amplified the discussion was the reference to changes detected by the researchers in specific areas linked to the case. According to the report, unusual modifications were made in the area connecting the Kaihao cultural space to the Bulgari Hotel between the 9th and 11th. Among the examples mentioned are security cameras partially blocked by objects, recently replaced traffic signs, and the absence of the Huai brothers building on several digital maps. Although these indications do not constitute conclusive evidence, they did increase public curiosity about the environment in which the events took place. The emotional impact of the report also played a significant role in its going viral. The final section of the document, presented as an epilogue, recounted the personal experience of the researchers, who described the psychological and social pressure they had faced during the information gathering process. According to their testimony, the fieldwork had involved sleepless nights, a loss of work productivity, and family tension stemming from their active involvement in such a sensitive case. This account was not presented with the intention of dramatizing the situation. Rather, it was offered as an explanation of why they considered it necessary to clarify the sequence of events. The sincerity of this narrative generated a significant response among users, who massively shared excerpts of the text across various platforms. The institutional response to the growing digital pressure was not long in coming. According to social media posts, 3 users who had shared information related to the case were arrested just days after the report was released. Although the official reasons for these arrests were not publicly disclosed, the timing was interpreted by numerous internet users as a sign of increased surveillance of online discourse. This event further intensified public interest, triggering a substantial increase in conversations about freedom of expression, digital responsibility, and regulatory mechanisms. The search for alternative methods to preserve the report became a notable phenomenon in itself. Upon perceiving the possibility that the document might disappear from the internet, several users suggested storing it on decentralized platforms or even in blockchain-based registries. The idea was not limited to a simple technical backup. It became a symbol of the collective determination to keep material considered relevant to public discussion available. Some users voluntarily translated excerpts into English, French, and Spanish, sending digital copies to international organizations and foreign media outlets to broaden the scope of the debate. This climate of uncertainty and heightened digital sensitivity coincided with the emergence of a second episode that would soon absorb some of the public's attention: blogger Song Zudei's statements about actor Li Lianjie. His post did not directly mention the Yu Menglong case, but the temporal proximity and the social perception that both events, on different levels, questioned the clarity of the official narrative generated an inevitable connection between them. According to several analyses published on social media, the discussion about Li Lianjie became a natural extension of public concern for transparency, not because of any connection between the cases, but because of the social context in which both emerged. The media frenzy reached its peak when users began debating the ethics of information, the role of digital citizenship, and expectations of transparency in the public sphere. For some, these episodes reflect a growing demand for informational accuracy. For others, they represent the structural limitations of a media environment saturated with content that is difficult to verify. In both cases, the independent report on Yu Menglong served as a catalyst for a broader dialogue on the relationship between institutions, citizens, and digital media. The magnitude of the discussion, coupled with the emergence of new elements in the parallel case of Li Lianjie, establishes the starting point for analyzing crisis management and the responses of the parties involved, which will be examined in the next section. The expansion of the debate surrounding the Yu Menglong case coincided with an unexpected phenomenon: the emergence of a second point of controversy involving the renowned actor Li Lianjie. Although the 2 episodes were not directly related, the social atmosphere generated by the discussion of the independent report allowed the blogger Song Zudei's new statements to gain significant traction. In this context, the crisis management by the figures involved began to be subjected to public scrutiny, becoming a central aspect for understanding the evolution of both narratives. The first element observed by users was the prolonged silence regarding the inconsistencies raised in the independent report. Until the document was widely disseminated, institutional communication had remained centered on a single version, attributing Yu Menglong's death to an accidental fall. However, the lack of a detailed response to the presentation of new visual, climatic, and chronological elements was interpreted by various users as a containment strategy. According to several analyses published in online forums, this lack of response could stem from a desire to prevent the debate from continuing to expand, although this perception remains solely within the public's interpretive realm. Within the same scenario, internet users began developing what they called a crisis management scorecard, an informally devised conceptual tool that evaluated the coherence, timeliness, and clarity of the responses provided by the parties involved. In the institutional case, this marker underscored the lack of supplementary explanations and the use of brief statements. From this perspective, the strategy was seen by some users as an attempt to preserve a linear narrative, avoiding multiple versions that could cause confusion or raise expectations for further clarification. As the debate over Yu Menglong continued to escalate, a second line of discussion emerged when Song Zudei posted a series of messages questioning Li Lianjie's identity and physical condition. In his posts, the blogger suggested that the actor's physical appearance, his voice, and certain perceived changes in his demeanor did not match the image many remembered of him. According to those publications, these elements were interpreted by Song Zudei as indications of a possible significant medical intervention. Although his claims were not accompanied by verifiable documentation, their dissemination immediately captured the audience's attention due to Li Lianjie's international fame. The actor's initial response consisted of a brief video in which he appeared wearing swimwear to show that he had no visible scars from surgical procedures on his upper torso. According to various observations on social media, this gesture was interpreted as an attempt to neutralize growing rumors. However, this intervention sparked divergent reactions. For some users, the video demonstrated the actor's willingness to directly refute the speculations. For others, the fact that he responded so explicitly suggested that the controversy had reached a significant level. The conversation continued to escalate when Song Zude posted new messages expanding on his initial observations, raising additional questions about the tone of voice and the nature of the perceived physical changes. The debate took on broader dimensions when internet users began to link these posts to previous discussions about the availability and accessibility of advanced medical treatments. According to some interpretations, the controversy highlighted a growing social concern about inequalities in the contemporary healthcare system. This context allowed Song Zude's statements to be integrated into a broader framework of analysis, where issues of transparency, medical ethics, and regulatory oversight were debated. The absence of an official statement from Li Lianjie beyond the initial video further fueled the discussion. Social media users pointed out that, according to past interviews, the actor had faced significant health issues related to endocrine disorders. In this regard, several commentators argued that the changes observed in his physical condition could be linked to the natural progression of his medical condition. Despite these arguments, the conversation did not die down, mainly because the available information was limited and fragmented. The lack of precise details allowed multiple simultaneous interpretations to persist. The case reached a more sensitive point when some users linked Song Zude's statements to debates about organ transplants. According to various interpretations published on social media, the tone adopted by the blogger in suggesting the possibility of complex medical interventions generated concern, especially given the recent history of public discussions related to hospital procedures and their regulation. In one of his posts, Song Zude referred to the need to establish strict regulations on transplants, which added an ethical dimension to the debate sparked by his claims. With the coexistence of these elements, the public conversation ended up informally unifying both cases within a single analytical framework. The perception that there was a gap between official information and citizens' interpretations. Although each case had completely distinct characteristics, the public grouped them under a single conceptual category due to their simultaneous emergence, the social prominence of the figures involved, and the growing collective demand for informational clarity. The crisis management in both episodes reflects the difficulty of navigating an environment where social media can amplify, reinterpret, or question data in a matter of hours. The absence of detailed responses, the spread of unverified interpretations, and the emotional impact associated with digital images and testimonies contributed to the discussion evolving organically, surpassing the individual scope of each case and becoming a collective phenomenon. In this way, the crisis management phase was not limited to the response of the parties involved, but also encompassed the social reaction to the lack of structured information. The perception of a communication vacuum, both in the case of Yu Menglong and in that of Li Lianjie, prompted users to develop theories, connect isolated elements, and draw parallels that, although lacking any formal relationship, emerge naturally within the narrative flow of public opinion. These dynamics set the stage for understanding the prolonged impact of both episodes, which is examined in the next section. The simultaneous unfolding of the Yu Menglong and Li Lianjie cases generated effects that far transcended the strictly media sphere. Although both episodes lack any direct factual connection, their occurrence within the same time frame produced a social phenomenon in which public opinion interpreted them as indicators of a growing climate of uncertainty. According to various observations on social media, public interest was not focused solely on the concrete facts, but also on how information was managed and on expectations of institutional transparency. In the case of Yu Menglong, the independent report sparked a sustained debate about the relationship between visual evidence, official data, and public narratives. But the temporal discrepancy highlighted by the document sparked questions that, according to user comments, underscored the need to establish more accessible mechanisms for clarifying events of high social sensitivity. The intensity of the discussion led some digital analysts to suggest that this episode could mark a turning point in how citizens participate in social observation processes, especially when there is an abundance of audiovisual material spontaneously generated by local residents. The emotional impact of the case also had significant consequences for those who participated in preparing the report. According to the testimonies included in the epilogue, the researchers experienced personal and psychological difficulties stemming from their involvement in gathering information. Their account, widely shared on social media, helped ensure that the case was not understood solely as a dispute over data, but as a reflection of the human cost associated with the persistent pursuit of clarity in an environment where available sources are fragmentary. In this way, public perception integrated an ethical dimension into the debate, focused not on determining culpability, but on evaluating the social implications of citizen participation in sensitive investigations. In parallel, the controversy surrounding Li Lianjie generated a different kind of impact, albeit equally relevant. According to multiple comments posted on digital platforms, the discussion did not focus exclusively on the actor's image, but extended to structural issues related to public health and the regulation of advanced medical procedures. Song Zude's posts, by raising questions about physical changes and possible medical interventions, sparked a broader conversation about access to specialized treatments and the need to ensure ethical and communication standards surrounding them. The public's reaction to Li Lianjie's lack of further statements also contributed to the development of this social analysis. According to several observers, the silence following the initial video was interpreted in various ways. Some considered it a strategy to avoid amplifying the controversy, while others perceived it as an indication that the actor preferred not to participate in speculative debates. These multiple interpretations reflect the complexity of managing public image in an environment where every gesture can take on multiple meanings depending on the interpretive framework adopted by users. The temporal coincidence between the two cases gave rise to a collective reflection on how contemporary society manages uncertainty. Various digital analysts pointed out that the presence of social media facilitates the rapid circulation of information, but also amplifies the complexity of distinguishing between verified observations and speculation. In this regard, the episodes involving Yu Menglong and Li Lianjie were used as examples to illustrate the current challenges in constructing public narratives, especially when high-profile figures are involved. The long-term impact can also be seen in the way spaces for citizen collaboration were consolidated. In the weeks following the report's publication, numerous users began organizing data collections, translations, and structured discussions aimed at creating accessible repositories for consulting relevant information. These efforts were interpreted by various commentators as the beginning of a broader trend toward collective documentation, in which citizens play an active role in preserving and analyzing events that carry a high emotional charge. On the other hand, the emergence of discussions related to medical ethics, especially concerning complex procedures such as organ transplants, led to a resurgence of social debates that had already been part of the public agenda in previous years. According to user observations, these conversations reflect a concern about the need for clear legal frameworks and stricter oversight mechanisms to prevent medical information from becoming the subject of speculation or unfounded interpretation. By integrating these elements, it becomes clear that the repercussions of both cases extend beyond the specific facts. The coexistence of official narratives, citizens' interpretations, and ethical debates generated a sustained space for discussion in which society examined the limits of transparency, institutional governance, and the public's capacity to participate in the analysis of complex events. In this regard, the cases of Yu Menglong and Li Lianjie not only became widely circulated media topics, but also triggered a profound reflection on contemporary dynamics of access to information and the construction of collective meaning. This combination of emotional impact, structural questioning, and constant presence on digital platforms lays the groundwork for understanding how these episodes continued to influence public opinion long after their initial emergence. With this, the analysis moves toward its conclusion, where the overall significance of the phenomenon and its implications for the future of social debate are synthesized. By jointly examining the cases of Yu Menglong and Li Lianjie, it becomes clear that both episodes reveal the inherent complexity of constructing and managing narratives in a society characterized by the speed of digital information. Although the facts analyzed belong to different contexts, the public response demonstrates a growing concern for transparency, communicative coherence, and the ability of institutions to respond to structured inquiries supported by visual material or citizen observations. This convergence does not imply a factual relationship between the two cases, but it does reveal a social pattern in which citizens actively seek accurate information when certain events generate uncertainty or apparent contradictions. In the case of Yu Menglong, the release of the independent report transformed the public perception of the incident. Not by presenting definitive conclusions, but by articulating a series of discrepancies that, according to various interpretations on social media, warranted a more thorough analysis. The divergence between the officially reported date and the date suggested by the weather conditions recorded in the videos became the central focus of the debate, underscoring that even small chronological variations can significantly alter the interpretation of an event. The massive reaction to this temporal discrepancy indicates that contemporary society is increasingly willing to examine the available technical details, even when the information comes from non-institutional sources. On the other hand, the discussion surrounding Li Lianjie emerged from a different angle, though it was equally influenced by the dynamics of digital public opinion. Song Zude's posts, by questioning the actor's physical changes, sparked a wide-ranging exchange of interpretations related to health, medical ethics, and communication standards regarding advanced clinical procedures. The silence following the clarification video fueled a plurality of possible interpretations, showing how, in the absence of detailed information, the public develops multiple hypotheses that coexist simultaneously within the digital ecosystem. What unites both episodes is not the specific content of each case, but the social setting in which they unfolded, an environment where citizens demand clarity and information circulates rapidly and in a fragmented manner. The interplay between rumor mongering, visual material, official data, and citizen analysis creates a constantly evolving narrative space in which questions can become more important than answers. This phenomenon reflects a shift in how contemporary societies interpret informational authority, evaluating narratives not only by their institutional origin, but also by their internal consistency and their relationship to available data. In the long term, both cases prompt reflection on the role of citizens in observing and analyzing public events. While informal investigations do not replace official procedures, they do demonstrate that today's public actively participates in evaluating events, especially when these generate a significant emotional impact or raise doubts about the coherence of the accounts. This participation is not intended to take the place of institutions, but rather to complement social analysis in a space where sources are multiplying and diversifying. In this context, the main conclusion is that both official and citizen-generated information must be examined with rigor, precision, and respect for ethical boundaries. The coexistence of multiple narratives demands a critical reading, aware that each fragment offers a specific perspective on a complex event. By understanding this balance, society can move toward a more nuanced form of analysis, where the pursuit of clarity becomes a shared endeavor. If you would like to continue exploring structured analyses of cases that have had a significant impact on public opinion, you can subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. In this way, you will be able to access content that examines in detail the visual, narrative, and contextual elements that make up some of the most talked about episodes in the contemporary social and media landscape. Thank you for joining this analysis. The debate remains open,